Welcome back, everybody. It is another edition of Sports Talk from the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. I am Mitch Rupert, along with the one and only Dr. Chris Masse. We are here to bring you the comings and goings of the week in the world of sports. And Masse, we got some things to talk about this week, but a special announcement, the biggest news of the week. Our very own cameraman and tech guy, Dave Kennedy, had a birthday this week, 67 years old. Can you believe it? He doesn't look like a day over 35. So happy birthday to Dave, who did not know that was coming and is laughing now. That's the best part of my day. Biggest news of the week beyond Dave's birthday, Alize Johnson gets a multi-year deal with the New Jersey Nets. And we talk about this the night after. I think it was 8 points, 8 rebounds. Or 12 or something like that in 12 minutes against the Sixers, leads a comeback in the fourth quarter. You keep saying, just give him a chance. He's going to show you what he can do. And every time he's on the floor, he does something productive for one of the best teams in the East.
Yeah, and that's the story of his career. He did it when he was in Indiana. When they gave him a chance, he produced. They sent him down to the G League. He'd go down. I mean, every year he was down there, it was constant double-doubles. So, yeah, I mean, that's the story of his life. I mean, at Newman, he made himself an all-state player. Goes to junior college, all-star there. Gets his D1 opportunity at Missouri State, becomes an all-star. So, you know, I truly believe that if he gets consistent playing time, he could really be a factor for them moving forward, especially with all the injuries that they have.
The biggest thing we see from him, he's energy. He's instant energy on that floor. And sometimes you need a kick in the butt like he can bring to a team.
And that's what he does. I mean, he's just a relentless worker. He's a relentless competitor. And yeah, I mean, that's a valuable trait when you have somebody that can, you know, I'll go back to my Bad Boys Pistons days when Dennis Rodman was normal. And that's what he brought off the bench. Once upon a time, he was normal, and that's
normal is a relative term.
But. And he came off the bench, and that's what he was, just that energy guy, and it lifted the whole team up, even if he wasn't scoring a lot or doing a lot of things that show up in the box score. And I think that's, you know, Alize is that kind of player that he can just pump up the whole team.
Well, not to get off track here, but Rodman even did that when he went off the rails a little bit. Like you look at the Bulls documentary, the fact that he was so valuable to the team that Jordan was like, go to Vegas for 2 days, get it out of your system, and come back. Like that kind of guy's valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, that's Dennis Rodman is not a local basketball legend that I know of. We're starting to kind of get into the groove here of the spring sports season, Masse. So far, knock on wood, we haven't had any severe or sustained weather issues. There have been maybe a couple instances of some COVID shutdowns, but nothing sustained, nothing really bad, and it feels like everyone's starting to kind of get in a groove here a little bit.
Yeah, you're starting to see more and more teams. You know, a lot of teams have now 3, 4, 5 games in, so that's good to see. And you know, hopefully it keeps going that way. But I think teams are starting to slowly get into a routine here, and it's fun to watch it unfold.
So here's the one thing that I've noticed about the season, especially in the baseball softball realm, and I haven't done the math because I'm not good at math, but it feels like we're seeing more lopsided scores than usual. I mean, and it's pretty common, especially in softball, because if you don't have a pitcher, you really struggle in high school softball. But it feels like every night we're seeing multiple 15-0, 17-2, 3-inning, 4-inning, and I wonder if that's anything you've noticed, and I wonder if maybe this year off affects more teams than others. You know, teams that are bringing back groups that have some varsity experience or maybe have just grown that gap between kind of the haves and the have-nots.
The experience is a huge factor, and some of these younger teams, you know, there's, you know, a Hughesville softball team that I saw for the other day, for example, 18 players, 14 of them are freshmen and sophomores, so that's 14 players with literally no high school experience coming into the season. And it seems like there's a lot more teams like Hughesville than there are teams that have a lot of starters that played as sophomores and freshmen 2 years ago. So I think that has something to do with it. It's just it's a tough adjustment when you basically have 2 freshman classes now. So experience, I think, almost always is a good thing. And now this year, I think it's more crucial than ever when you have a nucleus of some talented players, some experienced players that you can build around. And I think that is some of the separation right now. Some of the teams that we're seeing have a lot of success, had a handful of players that got a lot of playing time 2 years ago, and that certainly helps.
There's kind of something I talked about with Rick Lenwright, who's the girls track coach at Hughesville, a couple weeks ago, and kind of leans more towards the field than the track events. You can go run anywhere. You know, you can go out on a street, and I wouldn't suggest that. Do not do that. But you can do that. You can go for a distance run anywhere. You can't pick up a shot put and throw it in. You can't pick up a javelin and throw it anywhere. You know, so we talked about how in certain events it's going to take more time to get back into it. More rhythm events, more timing events. It's going to take some time. There's a rhythm and a timing to hitting and pitching as well, but it feels like maybe people, even in track and field, are starting to get that rhythm a little bit.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think in some of the games I've seen, even though some of the scores have been lopsided, it feels like the pitching might be a little bit ahead of the hitting right now, in general across the board, and I think that's, like you said, especially baseball and softball are such routine sports, and I think you can take as much BP as you want and go into batting cages and all that. It's not the same as at facing actual live pitching in a high school game. So, you know, I think as teams are getting more games in, you're starting to see some more consistent play, and I think we'll see that as the season goes on. Now it's just losing that year, I think, is just a huge blow for a lot of. It's just a year of development lost. So I think everybody's playing catch up right now.
You wrote in your baseball column this week about the St. John Newman Golden Knights. Yeah, I've only worked here 12 years. Why would I know that?
Yeah. We usually just go with Knights. Officially Golden Knights.
St. John Newman, their baseball program, I think, is worth talking about here because they have picked up right where they left off. I think they had a 15-6 campaign in 2019. They appeared to be making some real strides, and Corey Burkholder's group has really done a nice job. I think they're 5-0 now. They beat a good Montgomery team 10-6 on Wednesday night. They're hitting the ball really well. They've gotten some quality pitching and some depth in their pitching as well. This is a team to worry about.
Absolutely. It's early, but I think in District 4 Class A, they're probably the team to beat right now with Montgomery moving up to AA. Muncie's at AA now. And like you said, they've got two good pitchers in Keon Burkholder and Javal Weeks-Schuler. And that, especially in the Class A level, if you have two guys that you can run out there like that, a righty-lefty, can I get ahead to?
Yep, you're good. Go ahead.
That helps a lot. And yeah, they have some offensive depth. Weeks-Schuler, I think, is one of the best players in this area, and I've only seen him one time, but okay. I'm getting all the talking points early. Okay, we'll come back to that. But they have depth. That's important. This is a team that in the past they were struggling. They were just hoping they would have 9 players to play a game. Now they've actually got guys they can bring off the bench and do some good things, so they're dangerous.
It's like you're reading from my notes. And Masse doesn't, like, he has no idea what we're talking about when we sit. I do all the work, he just shows up.
I just bring the talent?
Yeah, but I literally wrote in here that at the Class A level, if you've got a couple studs on the mound and a couple guys who can mop up games late, you got a chance to be really good. And on top of that, Javal Weeks-Schuler is a guy who struck out 16 in 8 2/3 innings. Keon Burkholder hasn't allowed an earned run in 10 innings, and he struck out 18. You talk about the two studs up top. There are two studs up top.
Yeah, and Javal's a lefty too, so you got a righty-lefty combination, and Corey Burkholder's used them. The last two, the Muncie game, the Montgomery game, he's thrown them both out there, so it's two different looks. So that's a nice combo they got right there. And like you said, in some of these other games, if you can just get some guys to eat up some innings and get you some wins against teams that you're favored against, you're going to be in really good shape. And Weeks-Schuler was a guy that last year I was excited to see because I knew he had great potential. And unfortunately, we didn't have a season. But he can pitch. He's a really good. He's probably one of the better catchers around. And Corey Burkholder said he's a really good shortstop too. Flies around the bases, hits. He's a 5-tool threat.
We've seen a lot of these guys that are on the baseball team in different sports. They played football at Loyal Sock, basketball obviously with the really good St. John Newman team in the winter. But the quickness, the athleticism doesn't necessarily always carry over to baseball because it's such a hand-eye coordination sport. Doesn't matter with these guys. They're just really good. They've got 5 regular hitters hitting over 300. Draval Week-Schuler, who we've talked about, is hitting 500 and has driven in 9 runs. Caleb Reddy's hitting 462. Jeff Hamilton has 12 runs driven in already. So not only can they pitch, they can hit pretty well too, and they're stealing a bunch of bases left and right.
Yeah. To the first part, Jeff Hamilton's got an RBI in every game, and he's a guy that's played since his freshman year, started since his freshman year, and so they're building some depth in that lineup right now. And then the speed aspect, Nas Smith, who's having a breakout year, he's a weapon on the base. He was him and Week-Schuler were really good receivers for the Loyal Sock football team. Nasir Diamond can fly around the bases. Keon can run. So they can play situational baseball. I think if they're getting into a situation where their offense is having a tougher day like they did against Muncie, you can play some small ball. You can manufacture some runs that way. So they've got, I think, some nice balance between some run producers and guys that can manufacture runs.
Montoursville baseball is off to a 4-0 start this year, and I don't think that's too surprising. This is a pretty solid group.
Yeah.
Jeremy Eck has coming back, but they've scored 45 runs in those 4 games so far, and that includes wins over Lewisburg, Danville, and Jersey Shore, 3 traditionally pretty strong programs. But I kind of want to look more into the future with this Montoursville team because they have 2 more games to close out this week. Well, one was postponed against Shamokin, but then next week, they're lining up with games against Mifflinburg, returning state champs Selinsgrove, and a Central Mountain squad that's pretty tough too. Yeah. Their pitching depth is really going to be tested next week.
Yeah, and I think this is a week where we find out a lot about Montoursville. I think they're going to be pretty good, and I think they're showing that. But this is where, like you said, the known commodity coming into the season was Maddox Delana going to Connecticut, and he's been as good as advertised. He's that number 1 ace. But they're showing some good depth behind him. AJ Lorente's 2-0 now. He's a kid that he's from Florida. They moved up here before last school year, so he's got some good stuff. Nick Reeder threw a really good game against Jersey Shore. Grayson Rinker, a sophomore, has been really good in his 3 outings. So I think they're building that depth. And right now, I think it's a question of can those guys do it against some of the best teams in District 4. They've kind of already showed they can, because I think Jersey Shore is going to be a pretty good team this year. Danville just beat Selinsgrove yesterday. So I think they're starting to build something good there.
We've seen the last 2 years when they made their runs in 18 and 19, the pitching was there, obviously, and they struggled to hit in some key situations at times. Now 45 runs over 4 games. Masse, the old saying, offense wins game, but a lot of offense wins a lot of games. Yeah. So if they can hit to go along with that pitching of Maddox, I just made that saying up, by the way. That's not the real saying. But if they get some hitting to go along with this pitching that they feel like they have, they can be pretty good. Let's flip to softball a little bit. Another team off to a 4-0 start this year are the Williamsport Millionaires. That includes a season opening win over Tunkhannock, a real quality win over a good District 2 program. They've scored 38 runs in their 4 games. What do you make of the Millionaires so far? I think you've seen them once. Yeah,
they're dangerous, and this was a team that I had some high expectations for coming into the season because they were really young 2 years ago, and they have what we talked about. They have that advantage of having a lot of high school players with experience on the field, and those young players 2 years ago were pretty good, but offensive depth throughout. Chase Smith has gone to his bench and gotten plenty of production from his reserves. He's able to, I think, trot out some different players every game depending on certain matchups. So I really like their offense a lot. I think their pitching hasn't been great, but it's been solid enough right now. And they're young in the pitching circle, but the way they're scoring runs right now, as long as they're not getting bombed in the circle, I think they're generally going to be all right. Now, they played Bald Eagle area today. We'll by the time this video goes, we'll know that the result will be in. But that'll be a big test for them. But really like what they're doing right now. Sophomore Aubriana Blair hitting .615 has the team's only home run so far. Mila Kelly already has 4 triples on the season. Yeah, she's having a real good start, and it's a small sample size, but they're hitting .448 as a team. So it's not just the runs. And if you look at their statistics, they must have 15 to 20 girls that already have a plate appearance this year. That's the depth is incredible, and And this was they hit really well 2 years ago, and so they're getting some good hitting instruction right now, and they're good play. I mean, obviously they're talented players, and these are players that have a ton of travel ball experience and have done really well at that level. So there's a lot of good players there to choose from, and I think when you have so many good players, you know, to your point about how many players have at bats, that's competition on the team, and that means the practices are competitive, and I think that's pushing everybody to play better throughout the season. So, you know, it always seems like it comes down to them in Hazleton in District 2. It probably will again, but you know, I like what Williamsport's building right now.
One of the few track invitationals of the year held last Friday down in Mount Carmel. The Breslin Invitational, usually the Breslin Relays, but they changed it up to an invitational because there are so few this year. Got a few impressive results out of the meet. Montoursville's Gavin Livermore, he won the javelin with an area best throw this year of 169 feet 10 inches. Fellow warrior Lily Saul, she goes with the first sub 1 minute 400 to win the girls event, 59.77, and for good measure, she won the 800 as well. Pit recruit Sophia Gardner, which you watched and wrote about her on the basketball court this year, 2-time state medalist in the long jump. She wins the long jump at 16 feet, and it feels like she's starting to get in a rhythm there. And a big shout out to Lewisburg's Maddie Downs. She goes over 130 feet in the discus throw to win the Breslins. 130 feet would have gotten her on the podium in Shippensburg 2 years ago, so that's a big throw here early in the season. Maybe the biggest invitational of the year, the Jack Roddick Invitational down at Shippensburg this weekend, Masse, which is basically a mini state meet. And there's no AA, no AAA. It's everybody against one another. And it feels like there's a lot more teams coming into it this year because it's one of the few that are being run. This is a weekend where we're going to learn a lot about some of these track kids. And as I see the results coming in, it feels like kids are starting to find their groove. Like we're starting to see some better times. Quade Molino ran a 2:02 in the 800, which is really good, which was fun. Quade Molino at South Williamsport, his brother Griffin's coach in Hughesville. I wrote about him earlier this week, but it feels like kids are starting to find their groove. And this is the time of year where we're really going to see who can separate from the field.
Yeah, and that'll be a great barometer down there in Shippensburg when you have so many good runners going against, or good runners, throwers, all going against each other, pushing each other. So it'll be interesting to see if you get a lot of PR, new PRs out of that.
As a sprinter in high school, what was your best 100-meter time?
11.7.
And learn from Masse, do not throw the baton after running the 4x1. That'll get you disqualified.
That will. Almost cost us a shot in districts, but my coach pleaded with them and said, he's an idiot. He's never run before. He didn't know that was frowned upon. So we got in.
It's really out of character for you to act like that too.
I'm usually just like a twig on a log. I just go with the flow, but I lost it that time.
But should we talk about what happened to your Nintendo? No, never mind. We won't go into that. I think that's going to do it for us for this week's edition of Sports Talk from the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. He's the one and only Dr. Chris Masse. I'm Mitch Rupert. Dave Kennedy behind the camera. Happy birthday. We'll talk to y'all later,
I didn't
everyone.
want you to miss my face.